Welcome to Testimony Mountain. I'm so glad to be here with Jessie Czebotar and Alice Pirola, and both of them have been on here before. And so I do want to start, Jessie, with you sharing an update on your most recent expedition in St. Augustine, Florida.
Yeah, so excitedly, I'll have probably some videos coming out. Some pictures are already out on Instagram about that. We basically toured the whole area, and I went around and decoded everything. And I've been doing a lot of decodes this past year through the coaching courses that I offer on kingdomequippingcenter.com. But this is like your next level because that whole area deals with high priests and grand high priest and priestesses. So we had to do a crash course in the different signs, symbols, things that they use, as well as the contracts that are represented behind them. So it was intense, but at the same time, it went great. We had a great time. We did get a lot of kickback because, the enemy did not want us in the area, but we had authority to be there and we're able to do the work that the Lord wanted us to do in that area. So I know that's kind of the beginning, the first fruits of things that the Lord's starting to break forth across our nation as well as other nations, and so I'm excited to see what the Lord's going to do with it.
Awesome. So glad to hear. And so if you haven't been on and seen Alice's previous interviews, encourage you to watch those with her. And also there's some with her daughter that's just amazing, talking a lot about mental illness and those types of things. And today we thought we would look at PTSD. And particularly in this season where it's, high ritual season, that a lot of survivors may be struggling with different things resurfacing or triggering. And so I think it's a great topic today.
Yeah, Jessie, just speaking back to St. Augustine real quick, I saw all the sigils and all of the signs and notations of stuff that were on the Welcome to St. Augustine sign. That sign alone must have taken me hours to decode. I mean, I was like, what?
We actually didn't make it to the sign. That's considered for the beginner part. So we actually were far above that in our decoding. Yeah, so it was interesting.
That was amazing. Talk about, I'm going to broadcast everything evil in this town. It was crazy. Yeah.
We did. We went around and, we saw it firsthand, some of the stuff, so it was just like, wow, how much is here. And that's supposedly one of the first, founding areas for a country. But you would think, everything was over in the UK or Britain, with the Brotherhood when they come over. But when you see that, you realize even Spain, even the French had all the symbology. And so it's not just bound to, one nation. It's really widespread worldwide.
And hidden in plain sight.
Hidden in plain, that's it, Adena. Hidden in plain sight. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're talking about PTSD today, post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's different. There's also complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And PTSD is one incident that happens to a person, such as, say, for example, a car accident, God forbid, a rape victim, just anything. If you get a break-in in your house, that would be PTSD, which is one incident. And then complex PTSD is a series of incidents that go on for a number of years that add up and just really can take us out of the game, so to speak, of life. And that's our topic today. So who wants to start, ladies?
Yeah, I think it's good to define it and stuff. And I know there is a huge difference. Like for me, I've had throughout my lifetime several car accidents, most of them were not severe. But they would, it's like you would get injured or have uh, reminiscence of injuries from those events. And then, up until about 2016, that was when I was in a severe car accident.
Wow.
Where we hit a patch of black ice, going 55 miles and then basically sideswiped a mountain with
Ooh.
that. And that was what led to my third shoulder surgery. And I had just gone through 2 surgeries prior to that. And, it wasn't until after that where, I realized the complex PTSD, because, anytime I then, where it would even, the weather would get cold, like if I noticed a drop in the temperature, all of a sudden I would begin to get really anxious. Especially if there was snow, if it started snowing and I still have trouble, like if the roads are icy, I have trouble getting on those roads and, feeling safe. Like, I think that's the big thing is I don't feel safe. And then if the car starts to slide, it's like, like I'm bracing because I'm expecting, something bad to follow with that. And a lot of that's auto response. Like it's, it's just, I think that's the hardest part with PTSD is that mentally your mind gets bombarded with either images or flashbacks from that memory or the feelings, the sensations, like you get bombarded with it and you can't shut it off. So that's probably the hardest part of all that is that, and the same thing when memories start to surface for survivors, you'll go through periods where the memory will kind of keep cycling, but more and more details will come out as it cycles, as you're working through processing those memories for the first time. And, you'll get where it's just this overwhelming feeling. I know for me, like when I was working on my affidavits or even, some of my shows, when I get into some of the deeper stuff, that, my body goes into those auto responses where I'll feel very cold. I'll get where it'll sometimes be harder to focus, especially if like a detail that I haven't thought of before or for a long time surfaces. Then it's like, oh yeah, like I forgot about that. And sometimes it's hard to like, cause you can't really deal with it right away.
And I think, to understand that God made our bodies so incredible and that, that the warning system and all of those was the way he designed us to be able to be aware of danger and recognize danger and to get away. But the challenge is when it is chronic and it just gets into that hypervigilance where the amygdala is just constantly going and going and going. That's where we run into a lot of problems with being stuck in those cycles and those patterns. And thankfully, there is a way through, and that, gives us hope because God never leaves us stuck in those places. He has a way through, and that is part of the good news as we process through difficult things.
Yeah, thank God. What you're talking about really, Jessie, is triggers, and triggers can be sight, sound, smell, hearing, touch, the weather, anything that's going to trigger a memory. We may not even know it. It's subliminal. We don't even realize that it's happening. And it triggers us right back to that situation.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're there and it's playing out before your eyes. And Adena, when you're talking about hypervigilance, that is so hard on the body. One of my therapists used to say, it's like driving a car 100 miles an hour with the parking brake on.
Yeah.
And, it's like hypervigilance. You're just constantly looking, when is it going to happen? What's going to happen? I'm ready for it to happen, and so that takes its toll. I know for me, I get chronic migraines and I've had them since I'm 5 years old. I've been through neurologists and everything from, the natural health field to the medical health field. I've just been through everything. And I just know it's a trigger that goes into a migraine. And it's really, really hard. Our bodies respond in different ways. But like you're saying, Adena, God has a way out, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to understand too that there is a range of severity as well. Mm-hmm. And some things that are triggered are really obvious, and other things are much more subtle.
Right.
And so being aware, and how it manifests too, because like I was trained and programmed to be competent and to be, all of those kinds of things with the role that the system had for me. And so I come across as a very calm person. People say, they feel calm and peaceful around me. And it was a while before I got in touch with my body to realize, yeah, I may look calm on the outside, but if you could only see inside, I'm all tight and tense, and some people manifest it very directly. You can see the stress on their face, and other people, depending on, their experience and programming and all of those kinds of things, can look really calm and peaceful, but inside everything, So I didn't think I was hypervigilant until I really got in touch with my body. And it was like, wow, when I, really pay attention, I'm tense all over the place. Okay, Lord help me. I need to calm this down.
Yeah. And even if I wasn't necessarily programmed by the system, but even when you live through a trauma episode, chronically, like we all did, all three of us have, in varying degrees, you still have that front person that knows how to handle it, that knows how to calm the situation. And I was speaking to my therapist yesterday, and she's like, you were the fixer in your family. You were the oldest child that fixed everything and always felt the need to, perform and have to just make sure everything's going smoothly and everyone is happy and everyone is getting their needs met. And it's true. We grow up with that and it goes into our adulthood, but underneath we're hypervigilant. We're just, really, really tense, and it comes out in other ways physically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's common, for that. Like I went in seminary, we had to take this test that was it was kind of like the Meyers Briggs in a way, where it tells you about yourself, and it was focused on how do you naturally resolve conflicts. And it was funny because as we went through the test, mine came up where I was the peacemaker, I was the the fixer, the one resolving the issues in the family. But then the professor, he had all of us, he was like, okay, but what is your second thing that shows up, right? And it's like, oh, mine is like high extreme fighter, right? And he's like the seconds actually are your default. Like your default is your natural, who you really are, but what you present in the situation, those characteristics are what you have learned throughout the years that work, that give you the best results in situations. So you kind of you default to being the peacemaker or being whatever that what shows up on the face front, because that's what has worked for you to get the results that you want to get. So just kind of interesting.
Wow.
Do you find we default until we trigger, and then when we trigger, out comes that part?
Yep, there comes that. The warriors come out, and you're the fighter. They're gonna get the fighter.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So, what are some things that people can do? Let's discuss. What are some things that can happen to make us feel more regulated, more calm when we're going through a trigger situation, so that we can kind of keep a hold of ourselves when all heck is breaking loose around us?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and this is, I want to, I'm not saying that it's the most important, because I think that, our relationship with the Lord and being grounded in the word is probably, has to be your number one go-to.
Mhm.
But in crisis, you can't always think that way. So, it's like if you're in a moment, you're being triggered, you have, someone that's um, they're triggering you. Um, I think that what's most effective is good communication.
Yes.
Mhm.
We talked a little bit behind the scenes about being able to express both boundaries as well as what you need in the moment.
Mhm.
To either be able to say, I need you to stop. We need to take a break. You know, I need some
Mhm.
space. I need to be able to go pray. I need to eat. I need to, um, calm down a little bit.
Mhm.
Just the learning to make those statements to express what you need and what you don't need is vitally important.
Yeah.
I would agree. And what makes it more challenging is that some of the early programming in mind control is to not need, not want, and to
Mm.
completely
Yeah.
shut that down. And so that
And
was, you know,
you deprive yourself,
yes,
but
Mhm.
that's why I brought the food out is because that's probably like, one of the biggest thing in the hypervigilant stage is you don't feel the need to eat, you don't
mhm,
want to eat, but sometimes that's what you need the most is to eat or rest or,
Hydration.
yeah.
yep, the
Mhm.
water.
And
Mhm.
that's probably been one of my hardest things to learn was to actually get in touch with what I need. And
Mhm.
then secondly, to be able to express it because that was so programmed out, if I can't need, I can't want, I got to take care of everybody else and everybody,
Right.
all of those kinds of things. And so to just even saying the words, I need help, or,
Mhm.
can you help? I need this, was so foreign to me. And for me, the best practice was, a two-way journaling with the Lord. And now, most of my journaling with the Lord starts off with, here I am, I need help today. And
Yeah.
that's helped me to begin reprogramming
Mhm.
my mind that it's
Mhm.
okay to ask for help. And,
Yeah.
I'm still working on it when asking for my needs for those around me, but I'm getting better at it, and so it's a
Mhm.
process. It's a journey. This healing journey takes time because of things that are layered in so deeply. So,
Yeah. And I think when I was
Yeah.
working
Our
with
daughter was.
veterans or up in the mental health
Yeah.
units, like sometimes just acknowledging that there's a need,
Mhm.
like I would say things like, I'm listening to you. Like I acknowledge that I was
Mhm.
hearing, especially when they were getting escalated or yelling.
Right.
It's like I hear you, I'm listening. I need to grab a drink or a coffee, you know, would it be okay? Would you like one? Maybe let's sit down and have some water and sit down for a minute. And that changes
So
the
smart. So
situation, the
smart.
atmosphere,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. I was going to say our daughter was brought up in a very dysfunctional home because at the time my mental health symptoms were really acting up. And so she was used to being the fixer in our family. And she has now taught her daughter, who just will be 4 on May 31st. I can't believe how fast time goes. But her name is Desiree. And she will say, Mimi, Papa, I need some space right now.
mm,
I
So
just need some
sweet.
space right now. If she feels herself going into a temper tantrum or something, or we've corrected her and we're threatening timeout, do it one more time. We usually give her 3 strikes and then she goes into timeout. But if, something's going on, she'll say, I just need my space right now. I just need to settle right now. And so I think that's so good. And we can all take
Yeah.
a lesson from a 3-year-old going on 4,
Right.
that we just need some time to settle down,
yeah.
to
Yeah.
get our nervous system settled and grounded. you know, Jessie, we had spoken earlier about putting your back up against a wall or something, and using a blanket to soothe yourself.
Yeah, there's things you can do to kind of help ground, because one of the biggest issues through trauma and the different complex PTSD is the base feeling of not feeling safe or secure. So, how can you alleviate that feeling? Put yourself where you're sitting with your back against a wall so that you're not having to worry about what's behind you.
Right.
Be very aware positionally of where you're at, and find a way to, shore that up so that you're just having to, worry about what's in front of you. But even with that, you can easily maneuver yourself, to get yourself feeling safer. Some of the ways you could do that, like if, like when I was, again, working with vets and stuff, if they were, in my face, there were sometimes, because I'm a fighter, so I'll stand there and I, would have the security guards who would come and be like, chaplain, you need to move, So I had to learn, like, what can I do, right? So I would learn, I learned to either like sit down at a table. Now, when you invite them to sit down at a table, you have something between you and them.
That's great.
So if you could do that, in your home, it's in your home, or if you're out and about, put something between you and another person if they're making you feel unsafe. You can do that by taking steps, stepping back, maybe standing, at the edge of a counter, standing behind a chair. There's all sorts of ways that you can do that. The other thing is if you give them something. Like I found with people who make me really uncomfortable, if I simply said, could you hold this for me for a moment? And I literally would hand them my drink. And now their hands have something in it, right?
Right.
And it would make me feel safer, because they think they have to stand there and hold the drink, and then I can give myself some distance for a moment, not having to watch their hands doing all sorts of stuff, Sometimes that might not be a good idea, if they're trained in weaponry or other things, but most of them aren't going to think that. Like if you have somebody hyper vigilant and you ask them to do something to help you, it shifts their mind. They're like, oh, okay, yes, I'll help you. I'll hold your drink, So
they might throw it at you, though.
Styrofoam cups are great. Hold this for a moment.
Yeah.
Or pieces of paper, that was good too. But
and all the things you're saying are not demoralizing to the other person. It's still keeping their person intact, and it's keeping, them stable. So that's very, very helpful.
Right. And you're doing what you need. Sometimes you create more conflict based on their traumas. If you say things like, what you're doing right now is making me uncomfortable. If they've had that a bunch of times and that's a trigger for them, now you're escalating them more.
Yeah.
But if you just simply say, hold this, would you mind hold this for me for a moment? I need to go grab something. Now you've given you and them space for a moment.
Right.
You have them feeling like they're helping you. You come back into the situation with a thank you. Thanks for holding that. I appreciate it. You sit back down, and now you've made them feel good and kind of broken up the tension in the situation without escalating further.
It's really good. And the other part of that too is, as far as the grounding, if it's a past situation that is triggering in present, different things going on. The other thing too is to remind yourself that, this is 2024. I'm not in immediate danger. This is just triggering, remembering about a previous abuse that happened. And so I am safe and secure, grounding in the reality of this present moment. I'm actually not in danger, unless I am, and so those are different ways that we can ground.
And I think having something in the hands, like, I think that that's the most helpful, because you use different parts of the brain when you are putting something into the hands. So, you know, like a lot of times I'll use heat packs, or give people something to play with in their hands. When I get stressed out, you know, I'll have something. I like to roll pieces of paper, but that will give me something to kind of refocus my mind off of the stress, and kind of a tension releaser. You know, there's something with where you physically feel it, which is part of why journaling and writing is so great, because you know, you're allowing that memory to process through the hand, and that connection with the hand there.
You say heat packs, and my therapist always told me ice cubes. She would say that immediately when you take ice cubes and hold them in your hand, you're de-escalating your temperature from getting, you know, all worked up and heated up, and our face gets red and our veins pop out, you know. And it's just like, take those ice cubes and hold them tightly in your hand until they melt down. And that's really, it does help. It really does. I use ice packs on my head, on the back of my neck. I'll do that. And the other thing that's really helpful for me, I don't know about you ladies, but I'll revert back. I'll be like, my husband will say to me, how old are you right now? And I'll say 5, 7, 12, whatever the age is. And he'll say, what do you need?
Yeah.
And I have a blanket that I got for like $38 online, but it's like velvet on one side, and then it's fuzzy, soft material on the other side. And it's so cozy and so wonderful. And I call it my blankie. Why? Because I'm like a child when I need it. And I'll say, I need my blankie. And he'll just wrap me up in that, almost cocoon me, like he's swaddling me like a baby, swaddling. And it really, really helps, because I feel that safety immediately, because sometimes we didn't get that when we were children, you know, not sometimes, all the time. I never got it when I was a child, never got the hugs or the feels, you know, that you're safe, you're sound, it's okay.
Yeah. And it's so important to have, you know, a few people in your life who can be that, who understand those needs, you know, who are able to provide for you what you need. You know, I've got mine that aren't close by, but they're able to, you know, be there by phone to, you know, tell me, okay, you know, did you take a break, go warm up your heat pack, use the bathroom, grab some water. We all need kind of that. It's good to have somebody who can direct according to what you need and ask you what you need.
And I think it's so beautiful that the Lord has a number of different ways that he created us. And sometimes they can be different, you know, like Alice, it works good for you with ice. Jessie, it works good for heat. And, you know, and there's a variety of things. And the other one that I love is regulating our breathing. And so with our, you know, sympathetic and parasympathetic, you know, system, is that when we inhale, that's giving us energy to fight. When we exhale, it's a relaxation. And so if the anxiety or PTSD or triggering is happening when we do short through the nose, because obviously we need to breathe in, but then long through the mouth, double the time, that kind of helps regulate the system and calm down. And so that's one thing that I use for my clients. But it's funny because, again, sometimes something that works for others doesn't work for someone else. And so, you know, I was trying to work with a client. They were really anxious. And I was like, okay, let's do this breathing, you know, and that triggered him more, you know. And so I was like, okay, stop. We're not going to do that. Let's try something else. And so I love how God has created, you know, with our body and you know, those around us, different ways that we can regulate and calm down. So.
Very, very true. It's paramedics use that with the breathing, you know, just letting it out. And paramedics do use that. I remember I was working with a gentleman who had gone into a social anxiety attack. He walked into a congregation and all the people were there, and there was singing and it was noise, and he was just bombarded with it. And so he absolutely started flipping out, and they called the police and everything. And all he needed to have done, I sat him up against a wall, like you said, Jessie, put his back up against a wall. And I didn't even know the guy from anything. And I put my arm around him and just held him. And I said, look in my eyes and let's breathe together. Let's do this. Let's calm down. And he allowed me to do that, because I think you also, if you're working with somebody like that and you know what it feels like personally, you almost inherently know what the other person needs. And so you can give them that comfort. You can give them that security. And before you know it, he was fine. He was up and he was having a Coke and he was walking around, and he's just like, okay, let's go into the service now. So, do we know how to respond to others in that regard, to make them feel safe? We know we've got to make ourselves feel safe, but can we make them feel safe too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
especially little kids, like my granddaughter. Yeah. When she gets nervous, when she gets nerved up, I've got to put all my grandma panties on and get ready to go in there and just make sure that she's okay. So,
Yeah.
So good. And we were talking earlier about one aspect to this that, maybe not as familiar is the word the Lord gave me was time wound, and how, cyclically different things. And sometimes those are yearly rituals. Sometimes it's times, of abuse. I have one client who, the weekends are really hard for her because that's when her dad was home and, abused her. And so those often, our body just senses we're in that time zone again, and, things are triggering and surfacing. And so that's another aspect we need to, be aware of.
Jessie, you must really go with that a lot.
Yeah, it can go. It can also be locations, like if you've had a lot of abuses in churches or lodges, or if it was in the schools, like, so it can trigger by locations as well, or things that may remind you of a place where you were abused. That can very easily happen. And I know, like for me, and your body just automatically responds outside of your control. And that's just, that's part of how God made us, that there are things that, our bodies remember, the abuse and the things that we went through. So I know for me, like, the equinoxes, usually in the spring and the fall, is when I struggle the most. And I'll have, my body will just start mass flushing potassium, because those were times of the year where, I would have to go through a lot of it. And so, my body's just stuck on that cycle, and, we'll just start mass flushing, and then I'll start having all the complications of the severe low potassium. And, and it's nothing, it took a while to figure out, that's kind of interesting. Why is it every spring I'm all of a sudden having to be in the hospital, getting IV potassium? And, now I've kind of, after 10 years of this, trying to figure out everything happening to my body, I'm now at a point where I can manage, it's like, I know, like, okay, come spring, I need to really be mindful and start, increasing the amount of potassium I'm taking in foods, and, being mindful that I'm, maintaining like I'm supposed to. And that helps then and breaks up that cycle.
If you don't mind my asking, for those that don't know or don't understand, what specifically about the spring equinox and winter trigger you?
Well, not necessarily, again, like not mental triggers, but for the body, those were high ritual times that, were required, where we would be given, adrenochrome and other things to heighten the spiritual acuity. So your body gets used to having that excess external amount to heighten that spiritual acuity. But then in that, what it does is, because you're getting it from an outside source, your body will automatically, just like everything that you have, it will deplete. And then you also have the complication, because your body was getting it from an outside source, your glands don't produce an increase. So then you just start getting depleted of it. So that's kind of what I feel my body has been doing with it.
So you literally were addicted to adrenochrome then as a child when you were going through that. They addicted
Not,
you to...
I understand what you're trying to say. I would say it was like a little different. Like, it was something that they would use to heighten that spiritual acuity. It's just like you're used, like, because it's a hormone. So there really isn't like an addiction with it. It wasn't like I craved or had to have it, but they would just, you would get used to operating at a certain amount. And then when that amount wasn't there, yeah, you would have the crash withdrawals.
So when, particularly when it's a time element, what I love is that God is outside of time or experiences time differently. He can access our past and our present and our future. And so when we are just able to come and go, Lord, I need you to clear away the trauma over this time period, whatever that looks like. And that's a beginning step. A lot of these things are multi-layered. And so it's not like, well, the Lord cleared away the debris off that timeline or whatever, but being able to go, okay, but now there's a lot of wounding associated with that. And then also, like you were saying, Jessie, is it affected my body. And, this might be strange to some people, but, for us, we can talk to our body and be able to go, hey, I know it's coming up to this time. And so I need your cooperation to work. I know that what happened back then was very damaging. And would you be willing to help, have the Lord help us regulate, those hormones so that we can walk this season a whole lot better than we have in the past, and so it may seem funny to do that, but I'm finding the more and more that I'm intentional about my spirit, my soul, and my body working together as one, as a whole. It's so much better,
Yeah, you're expressing what I do, just in different words, like what I, because it is outside of our control. And it is important to bring that alignment between, our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies, and the Lord. So one of the phrases that, helped me as I was initially, figuring all that out, going through all the testing, is I would say the words, Lord, I give this, I surrender this under your headship, your lordship. And my favorite phrase, is until you are Lord over all things in my life. So, I would place it under that lordship. And you're saying the exact same things, just in a little bit different, words, but it does, it helps. It's funny because you wouldn't really think about that, like, do I need to ask the Lord to be Lord over my hormones and the chemicals in my body, my thoughts, how deep does that lordship go? And it's, until he's Lord over all things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I use grounding prayers, scripture. I'll use, even when my mind blanks out, I'll use the Lord's Prayer. And I'll just say it, even if I am walking alone, if I'm out taking a walk with my husband, he knows. If I start going into the Lord's Prayer, he knows, okay, she's calming herself down right now. But I use certain scriptures. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Greater is he that's in me than he that's in the world. Whatever scripture is going to ground you, to remind you that we are under that lordship, that he is our Father. He is our Abba Father. He loves us. He cares for us. And he can walk us through these things where our earthly fathers may not have been able to do that for us. Our Godfather can do that. Father God can do that for us. So
yeah. And you can take it with you, like, I know several people do have issues with blackouts and things like that. And so I recommend that they write out the scripture, keep it in their pocket, keep it on them physically, and put it up, especially like in their bedrooms, in your car, places where you're most likely to go, so that when you need it, it's there.
So good. And the challenge can be, particularly those of us who have gone through a lot, is it feels like there's no place that's safe,
Yeah.
And the way the Lord showed me, I wasn't even safe with, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There was so much trauma and programming around all of it that I just wanted to be in a bank vault. That was kind of the picture of the safest place. And so, we put up walls and barriers, and we learn how to self-protect. And it's needed, as survival back then. But when we continue in self-protection, it can become idolatry instead of trusting in the Lord. And, we can say, oh, I trust the Lord. Oh, I trust the Lord. And that's here. But often here we have all these parts of us that go, where were you when? What about this? What about that? What about that? And so it takes time and process. And part of that healing was being able to acknowledge that, yeah, you're right, Lord, I don't trust you. And I could admit that. And you're not going to strike me dead with lightning, And then to be able to go, and I can find a safe place in you. And so, sometimes that's one member of the Godhead is easier than the other. That's why I'm glad that there's three, because there's different dimensions of them. And some survivors are safer in a home setting. Some are safer outside. For me, I'm safest inside. I don't feel safe outside. And so, being able to picture a safe living room and Jesus sitting next to me, and I'm able to snuggle up to him. And so that picture I can take no matter where I am.
That's great.
Yeah.
And that can help stabilize me, if I'm triggered out. Because otherwise some survivors can get to where their life, well, I can't go there because I'm not safe. I might get triggered there. I can't do this. I can't go here. I can't go in an elevator. I can't do this. But when I know that I have that picture of me and Jesus safe on the couch, I can go anywhere. And I know that he's with me. And so sometimes that can help as well, just in that grounding process.
Adena, do you explain those things to people in your family or around you while you're going through it? Do you explain that to people and let them know I'm going through this process right now? Or is that an inward thing that happens for you?
For me, it's more inward. I do in the course that I teach, Transformations, Becoming Who You Are, and with my one-on-one clients, I work with my clients to let's establish a safe place, with Jesus or with Father, with Holy Spirit. And so we definitely do that. For me, I don't do that as much verbally. And, part of that is my family struggles with my journey. And so I'm not able to share that. But I know that even like recently when we went to the Capitol, there was a lot of triggering going on, but I knew that I was with people who cared about me. And so, it was just tucking into, I've got a safe place here and I've got people around me that love me. And I know that it's not happening currently, And so that would help ground me to stay present and not to be, even though that's what it felt like inside, it was just like,
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. I personally feel that to the most part that we can educate people about what's going on with us, if we can, if they're willing to receive it. That was a huge thing in my marriage. I don't think we would still be married today if I weren't able to educate my husband. This is what's going on. Not to the point where you supersede and take over the other person to meet all your needs. That's that's different. That's not boundary setting. That's, overstepping boundaries.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, I was coming home yesterday, and as I'm driving home, I was really tense. Had a lot of anxiety. And I just said to my husband, I'm going to have some time out a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go in the bedroom, close the door, just leave me be for a little 10, 15 minutes. I'll be good to go. And then we carried on from there. So, I'm so sorry. My heart just breaks when I hear that somebody's family doesn't necessarily understand. That's not good or bad. It's just a thing that you have to cope with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard. How about you, Jessie? Do you have that?
Yeah, I think that's a great discussion, because I think, for especially those like who have had abuse like myself, we didn't really grow up in environments where you could safely talk about it freely or with anybody. So that's, a new and a recent thing. And communication is so key, being able to learn to safely express your needs, your wants, and what you have to have in order to feel a certain way. And that can be hard, but it's a process, and I'm grateful that I do have people around me that are trying to navigate that process and understand, and begin to understand the things that I've lived through, and um, the depth of everything. But it's a challenge, and I think it's a challenge for family that weren't in the system. They don't always know what to do
Right.
with things that are coming up, or how to navigate things. And it's like we could drive into an area and all of a sudden it's like, nope, we gotta go. Like we cannot stay in this area, we're not going farther, just turn around now. And the safest thing for me is when someone just acknowledges there's something there, they don't have to know what it is, and they just take the heat and turn around and give me what I need. Because otherwise it's like, if they keep going, well, now you're going to get the warrior and the bear coming out.
Right.
And it's like all holy hell's going to break
Like
loose.
Adena says, oh,
Right. Like, we got to stop the car,
Yeah.
But it's like, a lot of us, we feel things in the spirit. We sense when there's danger, or we might get premonitions or things, where it's
Right.
like, nope, we need to not be here. And we're used to not being heard in that,
I'm just really grateful that the Lord has surrounded me with safe women who I can share with and walk that journey with. And so it is, there is a lot of grief that my family can't go on that journey with me right now. And I understand from the sense that, for me, I didn't have memories of any of this until, about five or 6 years ago. And so they experienced all of my life, I was the stable one. I was the one who took care of everybody and fixed everything.
Yeah,
And
the
so,
cover, that's what my family had too, was the cover life,
And so the cognitive dissonance of someone who I've always seen as perfectly and good and strong and doing all of these things, and now you're saying all of this stuff, they just couldn't handle it. And so, I was able to understand that I can't share, And initially it was just like, well, these are my closest ones to me. I should be able, I want to share my life, And so it just, I had to shift perspective and, just have grace for them where they're at. And so it's not an easy journey, but the Lord will supply the support and the encouragement that each one of us need. And so that's important to understand.
Yeah. I put myself back in therapy because I found that I was using my husband too much as my therapist. I realized I can't bleed out onto him all the time. It can't always be him. That's my sounding board. Because I saw this stress starting to manifest in him. And I've been out of therapy for 2 years. I've been in therapy since my early 20s. Never really took a break, but then I did take a break for 2 years. I figured I was fixed. Perfect. And then I said, no, I can't do this. It just helps to have that third party to sound off to, and of course to go to Christ with it. Absolutely. It's just, it's a different dynamic, and I think it's going to take away a lot more stress in our marriage too. So
I think that's smart, is to recognize the multifaceted complexity of it all, and to give yourself permission that it is okay, to be in different spaces where, you share some things with your family, but then the harder stuff, you have someone who is more professional, whether that's a pastor or a therapist. It's okay to have those people in your lives and to have help, somebody who knows and understands and can help navigate and walk through. That's important, and it's important to set yourself up so that you're not, and maybe that's a good place to go for a moment here, is that many of us with the severe traumas, they're heavy. There's a heaviness that comes with it. And I think it is responsible to not expect one person in our lives to carry all that heaviness for or with us. It is good to have multiple people so that we're not overbearing or overburdening someone, or expecting or demanding all the time of one person.
It's so good. And along with this, to me, if we can readjust our expectation as well of people around us, as well as the whole process and of ourselves. And so a lot of times we are in that mentality of, when am I going to get fixed? Or when is this going to, and the hard thing is that particularly when people are early in their journey, is the reality is it's likely to get harder before it gets better. And, so there's kind of this expectation of, well, if I take this course, if I do this, if I go to therapy for a certain amount of time, I'll be all better, or I'll be normal,
Yeah.
And it can,
and yet you find each time there's deeper layers, like that first time around is just, the candy coated surface stuff. But each year the Lord will take you deeper and deeper and deeper with it. And with that comes a more richer, like, healing in the process. Like, and sometimes that's what we miss out on when we think, oh, well, that didn't work. I'm not healed, or now I'm worse. We miss out on the richness of the healing the Lord has for us because we fail to see that it's a process He has us going through.
Right.
And so when we can see it as a joyful journey with the Lord, I mean, it's hard, but I am so much more in love with Jesus than I was when I started this journey. And I understand grace like I never did before, because I was always a strong girl perfectionist. I didn't need Jesus, but there's such, like you said, that richness. And so when we see it as this journey of intimacy with the Lord and with ourselves, learning new things about myself, and even parts of me that were compartmentalized that, I haven't had access to, but now as I'm growing, that those parts of me begin to come into this whole of who I am. And so it's, even when we talk about triggers in our groups, is we talk about the treasure behind the trigger. And so instead of going, oh no, I'm afraid I'm going to get triggered or something, being able to go, you know what, there is a treasure behind that. If I'm willing to press into what the Lord has for me. He says He works all things together for good. So I know that there's something good, and I'm going to make it through this. And so that helps us overcome the stigma of, oh no, I don't want to, this, and this, but just, okay, God's got this. And, what they say to me over and over, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is they're just like, just put your hand in our hand and take the next step. That's all I have to do. I don't have to figure it out. I just get to rest in them. And that has made such a difference in my life.
Yeah.
By holding it all in and expecting that we have all the answers and that we will figure it out on ourselves, by ourselves. Mm-hmm. That is very selfish, and it actually blocks us from our Christian brothers and sisters receiving the richness of our testimony that can help them.
Yeah.
And, when we testify, how do we overcome the enemy? By the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Mm-hmm. And so when we're overcoming and reaching out to other people and they're hearing our testimonies, they're saying, wow, I can apply that. I can do that. Mm-hmm. I can, work that in my life. And whether it's somebody like Adena that doesn't have those people in her family, or somebody that like me that does, Jessie has a little bit of both going on. Mm-hmm. And we have to see ourselves in others in order to give ourselves permission mm-hmm. to go to that next step, that next part of the journey. Because when we hold it inside and we get so negative, we get angry, we get ugly, we get just wrong with it. It's a very unhealthy thing, very unhealthy.
Yes.
And I think a big part of it too is, we're all human. The word of God says that we fall short, but that doesn't mean that we'll never have the victory. So how do we get through those times when we do fall short? Yeah. I think sometimes the greatest thing we can do is just confess that, I made a mistake. I hurt you. Mm-hmm. I offended you. Mm-hmm. I apologize. I take responsibility for things I've said or what I've done. Sometimes our families or those that are walking in that process through us need to hear those things from us, and not being afraid to, humble ourselves and to admit our humanness,
So good.
I was wrong. You were right.
Right? It's I was wrong and you're never right. That's the way I like to. No, I'm just joking.
There's such a beauty when we can learn to just be us, mm-hmm. and not living out of the presenter or mask or any of those other things, and mm-hmm. that we can make mistakes and we can admit them in the light of God's love, because we are forgiven, mm-hmm. and it doesn't give license to sin, we know that, but it encourages us along the way. Mm-hmm. So many people beat themselves up when they do things wrong, or make mistakes. And that's one of the things that I just, it was a big aha moment for me to realize, when I beat myself up, I'm agreeing with Satan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't want to agree with Satan.
No.
That's very true.
I want to agree with God, and he's not beating me up. He's, inviting me into his arms of love, and so learning to be gentle with myself like he is has been so powerful. So,
and he always leads us through that space of, confession, repentance, mm-hmm. and then that leads to restoration in relationships.
Yes.
It doesn't lead to guilt and shame. That's not where the Lord leads it. When we confess and turn away from our sin, he leads us to that place of restoration mm-hmm. in relationships based on love, which, my favorite line in 1 Corinthians 13, when it talks about love, is love keeps no record of wrong.
Right.
And that's how we are to be in our relationship with others, is not to continue to hold things over people's heads or trudge things back up that have been dealt with in the past. We're to be able to walk fully in the grace of God with them, going forward in the good works that he has for us to do together.
Yeah.
Right. Do unto others. Would we want it done to us?
Yeah.
Do unto others as you would want done.
And it doesn't mean that we don't process the pain, of other people's stuff. And so there are processes that we get to go through, with that. Some people take things like you just said, and they go, okay, well, we just never talk about, we never, expose anybody's, stuff. And there's times when public exposure is needed, when it's a leader and it's hurting many, many people, and we have to go through our processes. We don't want to spiritually bypass everything, but God always has solutions, and it's just bringing it all into the light of his love. So I love that.
I mean, Jessie, I've learned so much from you, from 3 years of listening to your testimony, watching you on shows, different podcasts, Adena's podcast, Chantel's podcast, just so much richness has come into my life through your testimony. I just want to thank you for that. If you didn't have the courage and through Christ to be able to let that out, and the good, the bad, the ugly, it's just it's really helped. Reading your books has helped tremendously. Attending your seminars, you're wonderful. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I think the same thing here. It's like we're all out there. We're all speaking. We're all sharing our testimonies, and I know certainly each of you as well. There's been things that you've said or done, or your shows that you've brought out that have meant so much to me, that have redeemed things in my life too. So
it's beautiful, and that's what the body is about.
Right?
That's right.
You learn from one another. Well, our time is up today, but this has been so very, very rich. Just thank both of you so much. And I love us ending on that testimony word, because that's what this channel is about, is that the power of our testimony to change lives. And, what God has done in all of our lives is so amazing, and I'm so grateful for. And just want to encourage those of you who are watching to like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear this, particularly about PTSD and about overcoming. And also, there may be those of you who have a testimony that you want to share. I'm always open to that. We want to hear more testimonies of God's goodness and what he's doing in our lives. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Adena. Thank you so much.
See you next time on Testimony Mountain.